Okay, so I'm Rainmaker, and I think most of you guys know who I am. I presented last year as well, but for those that are new in the room, I'll kind of go through who exactly am I. By day, I'm a principal consultant based out of Washington, D.C., and I design enterprise architecture solutions for large enterprises that are also based out of D.C. I travel quite extensively in doing that, and I tend to work with messaging, authentication, and data centers, and a lot of technologies that go into the enterprise world there. By night weekend though, which is what mostly interests you, I'm a competitive triathlete. I run, I'm training for the Philly Marathon coming up here in a couple months. I try to cycle and I attempt to swim. I talked about flotation devices aren't my favorite things, so anything that helps me in the pool is great. I've raced a few Ironmans, a few marathons, and a whole lot of far less painful races. 5Ks are a lot more fun than Ironman, despite what anybody will tell you. And I love to travel and tinker with gadgets. My wife would probably say just stockpile gadgets. Some of you probably have seen pictures of the large piles of things that you all send to me. So it's a lot of gadgets. And I eat lots of cookie trimmings and pieces as well. Those of you who follow my blog know that my wife does a lot of baking, and so as part of that, I have to eat lots and lots of cookies and lots of things that are cakes and whatnot. And she actually came along with me here today. She's up in front there. It's funny because when you write for as many people as you write for, you forget that you all know me and I don't really know you. So it's kind of funny. I walk around and they go, "Oh, is your wife here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, actually she's right there." So there you go. And she's also the one that made you all those ANT Plus cookies in your bags. So what is DCRainmaker.com? It's funny, you go to like Interbike or something like that, and you walk up and you have your tag and it says DC Rainmaker. They go, "What is that?" And I write sports technology, but I also write about me. It started 4 years ago as a blog just about me and training, like every other sports personal blog. I ran 5K and I came back and I eat rigatoni's for dinner or whatever I want. Since then, it's expanded a bit. Now I still do the same thing. I still write about what I did for this weekend or whatnot, but I also write about sports technology and I write about sports in general and the industry around endurance sports. Reviews are the primary drivers of the site of traffic, and today it's about 500,000 page views a month, 250,000 unique folks a month swing by. So a pretty big catchment of people are looking for review information there. And also have 5,000 plus RSS, blog readers a day, and the 4,500 Twitter followers. And also, I cater to and help a lot of the different magazines and publications out there today. I'll talk about that in a second. A lot of you have asked privately, how am I funded, or how do I make money, right? Because there's concern if I'm reviewing sports technology products, am I making money off of advertising? There's actually no advertising on my site at all today. It's all based on affiliate revenue, which means that if somebody goes to the site and they find something they want to buy based on a review I've done, they can go off to Amazon, buy that product, and I get a small bit of it back. But I review things that are not on Amazon or anywhere else. It's just one way of getting money. And so there's no advertising today, and at least from the products I review, I plan to keep it that way. We'll talk about what devices I use daily. It's kind of interest to a lot of folks out there. I'll just go through the kind of the common ones. And these are the ones that I use every day, right? If I'm reviewing a product, I'm still using that device, but these are the ones when I'm not reviewing a product, I'm going back to. For the swim, I'm using the Thinnest Swim Sense. That's a new watch that came out this winter that allows me to go in the pool, record my data, and then upload it to their site, and it automatically gets transmitted to Training Peaks. So for me as an athlete, it's great because I don't have to deal with multiple services and whatnot. I just plug the device in, and it magically appears in Training Peaks for me. The bike, I use the Edge 800. I used to use the Edge 500, but somebody else permanently borrowed that. So now I'm back to the Edge 800, which I love because it has all the mapping and whatnot that I might want to use for rides. On the run, I'm currently using the Garmin Forerunner 610, but I'm also really excited about what a lot of you guys have coming out this fall for running watches and ones that you've already announced that are coming out. So I'm looking forward to trying some of those out. And then for weight, I have a lot of the weight scales. Pretty much all the weight scales that you guys have talked about I actually have. There's a small stack of them there. So I use whatever's closest to me. I walk into the bathroom and there's 2 of them there. It's kind of like load balancing or clustering. I can pick which one I want, whichever one's working. It's great. And then I also have other things with other devices. You've heard Chip from Wahoo Fitness being talked about over and over and over again. That's because the folks that are using this platform are developing so many cool things, and I use those things for everything from tracking to other things that are related to cycling as well. So very, very cool stuff. So we talked about, this name of the slide deck is feedback by the millions. To put it in perspective, since this day last year, there's been 2.8 million product review page views on product reviews alone on my site. I went last night and looked at the numbers. Those are people that have read product reviews just in the last 12 months. What I did is I look at the feedback from that on a continual basis. As I stand here, there are people making comments on product reviews and sending me emails on questions on products. But I also put together a sports survey last winter. It was really interesting, so I threw this up there sort of last minute, didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know if I get a bunch of one-line answers saying, company so-and-so doesn't have this, and they suck because they don't have this, right? And you kind of expect that sometimes on the internet. But I was blown away because what I got was folks that wrote novels. Like people actually maxed out the comment character box on these things and how to write 2 and 3 comments because if you were printing out, it'd be pages of information. And I know a lot of you have used that in designing your product since, because you looked at that and said, wow, there's over 100 plus really detailed, really thought through comments. There's actually now a single comment there where it's one line of somebody saying, I just want this. I want this and here's why, here's my use case. The folks that read the blog are across all spectrums. I have Olympic gold medalists that read the blog, not just one, but multiple of them. I've got the top athletes in the sports across a number of sports reading the blog, but I also have folks that are trying to lose 300 plus pounds. And, I hear that story a lot of folks that started reading 2 years ago, just were interested, they stumbled on it, and now they've lost 100 pounds or 200 pounds or 300 pounds. So it's across everything. It's not just the high-level endurance sport athlete. Also of interest is only about half my users or readers are actually from the US. I know that may surprise you as a US-based blog. It surprised me. I was doing a giveaway, and I started noticing the trend. I do giveaways roughly every month just for fun. I fund them myself. I just pick a product that I like and give it away. And I was noticing that I was sending a lot of stuff to Europe, which is great, but it's also expensive for a US person. I was trying to figure out why I was sending stuff to Europe, so I looked back at the numbers and realized half of my readership is outside the US, which explains why half of my giveaway recipients are also outside the US. And then finally, I also write for slowtwitch.com, Bicycling Magazine, as well as Men's Health, their online blog. So product reviews. Those that have seen my product reviews know that I actually use the product, which may sound funny, but I know all of you have dealt with members of the media who go out and, quote, use their product, but don't really use their product, right? They go ahead and they just simply write something up on it in a paragraph and that's it. I'm actually using it just like a consumer would use it. Maybe not with a sports gel, maybe that was because I was lucky. That's actually the Xperia product, the new Active, the waterproof one there, that you've kind of heard a little bit about here and there. And that's something I just did. On the top there, what you see is a bunch of cycling computers that are underwater in the bathtub testing the IPX7 waterproof rating, right? A lot of folks ask, is it really waterproof? And they say, I go in the rain and is it gonna die? And I say, well, I stuck in my bathtub for 20 minutes and it seemed to be fine. So, what can you say? And so I really do use them, to the fullest potential of the product. A lot of folks consider that my reviews are manuals. They look at the site and, if you haven't been there and you haven't looked at the review, go look at some of probably the best examples, the 4-310, the Time and School Trainer review. And you'll see these things are 60 to 80 pages long. They're kind of long, but it's what people, they want that detail, right? Much more than just a screenshot on a PR marketing page somewhere. I also communicate why something was done. That's perhaps the biggest message I want to deliver to you today is when I'm reviewing a product, I'm not looking to get to the end of the review and say, this product sucks because of this, right? I want to say, here's how the product works and here's why. And I want to reach back to you as engineers and say, why do you guys make this decision? And then find a way to communicate that. And that I think is important because a lot of times you go on the internet and you find that people have said something about a product that just it's not true, right? But you don't really have a channel to get that truth out. So I'd like to try to understand from you why you made the decision you made, because you all made it for a reason. I know that I engineer things as well. I know that there's always a reason why you made that decision. So I want to get that out. And then last but not least, as you can see, I kind of beat the crap out of the products to the limits that you have specified, right? In other words, if you're specifying IPX7 waterproofing, then you should be able to do IPX7 waterproofing. That's what the consumer expects as well. And if you look, it's kind of hard to see the very top picture up there. It's in between the gloves and the water. It's actually a bike on top of an eggplant truck in Jordan. And that bike on it has Cyclops, I think they're under somewhere. Their wheel set that I was demoing at the time, it's a $2,000 wheel set with a $1,300 power meter and a $500 head unit on top of an eggplant truck in Jordan, the country Jordan, in the middle of nowhere with a guy that didn't speak any English whatsoever. There's a rather funny story behind that. And at the time, I'm sure that the Cyclops folks probably would not have thought it'd be terribly funny. But if you have a chance, go look and just search the word Jordan on my blog and read behind that story. So last year, at the end of the presentation, I said, what are the gaps? What are the things that people see in sports technology that aren't being catered to? And the first one was, and I'll kind of go through how things have changed in the last year and then talk about what people still want. Data right sizing and data standardization. A year ago, I expressed frustration by the fact that everybody was doing different things around data right sizing, right? Some people do 1 second recording, some people are doing smart recording, some people are doing all sorts of wacky things. And there was no common way to get that data out. And to analyze that data across a broad spectrum of platforms. And that includes both file formats as well as the way you record the data. We've seen major improvements here in the last year. I'm now seeing that, when I talk to you guys about what data formats you're using, you're saying the same message every time. You're saying that you want to do 1 second recording or greater, in some cases Hunter talked about yesterday. That's awesome. That's really good. And there's a lot of people that appreciate that, even if it's not something that you're going to hear, through your normal PR mechanisms. That's well appreciated by a lot of folks in the industry. Swimming, last year I said that swimming was an open market. There was really nothing being done there. It's still an open market. It's still a huge market to tap into, but there's a ton of new devices out there. It's just that today they're not cohesive, right? And I'll talk about that in a minute as well. Live data tracking, there's been some improvements there, but there still isn't to the degree there could be. And again, I'll go into that more in depth in a moment. Ability to wirelessly sync watches via the phone and internet. You saw the demo yesterday with Timex. Chip has been doing some stuff similar with the Garmin watches now for a few months. Really, really cool things, right? The concept where I can be out in the middle of nowhere, like here, right, without a laptop near me, and just take my phone, my watch, and upload that data straight into Training Peaks or another platform. Very, very cool stuff. And then I talked about new data streams and sources, a lack thereof. And while ANT has done a great job in releasing a lot of new profiles over the last year, we're still not seeing that adoption of those profiles into the mainstream devices. So let's talk about live tracking. When I look at all the things that are in sports technology today, I see this as the biggest opportunity, right? I see this as the one that in all the presentations we've talked about, or you've seen in the last 2 days, people have talked about this in some way, shape, or form, either directly or indirectly. Today, there are solutions out there, but none of them are doing a good job, right? And there's solutions that are so close as well, and to kind of pick on two people, the Garmin GTU, an awesome solution. It does GPS, but not ANT+. And then there's the HHM folks, or HMM folks, which I talked to yesterday, that do ANT+, but not GPS. And I know you guys are coming out with stuff with GPS, next year you talked about. But you see how you have two different products that if you just marry the two together, I just wanted to kind of yesterday go, okay, where's the Garmin person? Where's this person? Go up, find a room, and come back and tell me when you're done, right? Because that's what we needed, right? You want one product to do everything. If you're as an athlete, I don't want to carry 3 or 4 products on me in a race. That's not realistic. Cell solutions, there are phone-based solutions today where there are applications that do tracking, right? Map My Ride is one of them that does live tracking. There's a lot of others that do that same thing, and they're great until you run out of battery, right? So 2.5 hours later or whatnot. And they also don't do a lot of historical reference. So most of the solutions out there today will simply tell you, I am here, I am here, I am here. They don't say where you were or what you did, right? So they may have a trail, but they don't say in the context of an athlete what your performance level was across that time period, which is most useful. If I'm in an Ironman or a 100-mile cycling race and and I see that you drew that line on the Ironman course. That's good. I'm glad you're following the course, but I need to know, are you following the course and actually doing the race correctly from a performance standpoint? So look at device integration to solve this in the short term. I think long term, I would be amazed if I came back a few years from now and you didn't have GSM in cycling computers, for example, or in watches natively, and transmit that information out there. That's just a logical evolution of the technology to be able to do that natively from the device itself. Today, though, we can do that using, just like what Timex showed off yesterday, the concept of the device is paired to the phone and then transmitting that onward, right? In other words, it's much easier for a phone to transmit data 24/7, it's just data if GPS is off, right? I mean, we all have that in our email. Our email is streaming constantly to our phone and it's doing that all day long. What if the watch was doing the GPS work, transmitting to the phone, and the phone was in turn taking care of the data transmission to the cell networks? And of course, that leads into all sorts of other interesting areas around inter-team communication and coach to athlete and automated emergency support, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's a lot of opportunities there. So new data streams. That's one of the biggest ones where athletes today, they understand speed, they understand cadence, they're grasping more power meter concepts, right? They're understanding that, and the more they understand that, they say, wow, there's so much more cool stuff we can do. And I've seen a lot of that over the past few days here. We talk about aerodynamics. What the Kananaskis guys are doing is groundbreaking stuff. And I think if you look at your devices 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to say that they're doing what power meters did 5 or 10 years ago for aerodynamics, right? And it's up to you as device manufacturers to figure out how to integrate that into your devices and figure out that roadmap. But that's clearly the future. There's no doubt about that. Fall detection. What the Spantech guys just showed a minute ago on a different portion of the device, but if they had showed fall detection, imagine you tying that into a cycling device, right? Imagine you saying, the cyclist just fell off the bike. Going to the head unit and saying, did you really just fall off the bike? And if the head unit doesn't respond, if the user doesn't respond, saying, you know what, now I'm going to use that cell connection and go and call emergency folks, whether or not that's 911 or it's emergency contact you've already defined, right? That's the future of doing something useful. And you talk about, I know there's people in this room who have been hit by cars out in the middle of nowhere, right, and left for dead, right? Imagine if that's happening instantly and automatically. Equipment tracking, the ability to know what head unit, or for the head unit to know what bike frame it's on. This is useful for a lot of folks. You talk about device profiles, bike profiles, right, where you're on a mountain bike, you're on a road bike. And just this morning, I saw some confusion on some comments around, I can even have multiple bike profiles. What if you walked up with your head unit to your bike and said, oh, you're on a mountain bike, right? I'll change all the device profiles to support that mountain bike. Hydration, nutrition monitoring. This is probably, I think, the second biggest area behind real-time tracking that you can see going forward. I was talking to a couple guys the last couple days, and one of the things that I was saying was that, you look at an Ironman race or any sort of endurance race in more than a few hours, and there's, especially in Ironman, there's really, you go onto the bike and you're pacing, right? You're pacing via heart rate or via power or maybe even just via raw speed if you're really brave. But you're pacing via something, and you get off the bike, and if you've done that properly, you may be set up in a good position. But in reality, when you talk to Ironman athletes, there's only 2 things that matter on Ironman day, right? Pacing and nutrition. The only 2 things. Yet we have nothing for nutrition. We have no way to know, are you consuming that nutrition in? Are you actually taking in however many ounces of water it is an hour? And is that system telling you, hey, you know what? You're 3 hours in, you've taken 20 ounces of water. This is gonna be a really long day, right? It's not gonna work. And you can, that would be incredible stuff to do. And there's products today that, Camelback has this little hydration sensor, it costs like 20 some odd bucks. And it has no ANT Plus in it or anything like that, it just tells you a number. And what if that was ANT Plus enabled? What if that then could read to my watch and say, yep, you've taken in 28 ounces this hour? Great, you're good to go, and keep on going like that. The other cool thing we've seen is ANT Plus device profiles used in interesting and innovative ways, right? Existing profiles, and Ross kind of alluded to this morning where, you've got a kayak paddle power meter using the bike power meter profile, right? You've got lap view for swimming using cadence and distance profiles, right? And then you've got potentially geocaching profiles that could be used for race-related tagging, right? So imagine you're in an ultra marathon, where you're out there doing 100 miles, and you want to know you're on the right course. What if you put those same little chirp devices that we ran around last night in the field looking for at mile marker 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. And as the racer hit those mile markers, it broadcast a check into them, right? It said, yep, you've now checked into this point. Here's your code, and keep on going. Or just have that recorded in the log file of the watch automatically. So much potential here for cool things. So what are the different categories that folks want? Because it's interesting, you can't bundle endurance sports into one category, or sports in general, just like you can't bundle medical into one category. They're very distinct things. And you talk about runners. Runners want one thing. They want a watch that looks like a watch, right? And I went through all the feedback again last night, and every single runner-related post was, or question or comment was, I just want it to look like a normal watch. That's it. That's all I want. Just a normal watch. But the cool thing is, you guys have done that. In the last year, I came here a year ago, I said that, and it was kind of tough because there wasn't a lot of normal-looking, good running watches out there, right, that did all that. Now, there is. That's common, right? You don't have to have this bulky thing for a runner to have what you want there. They want consistent pacing information. They see the challenges with GPS, right? They see, and there's a lot of ways to solve that, right? Where they see they're going 7:30, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 7:30, 7:30, right? Very, very frustrating for a beginning runner. As a more experienced runner, you've kind of gotten used to that, but as a beginner runner, it's tough. And there's certainly lots of interesting ways you can get around that on the watch by doing lap averages and all sorts of stuff like that, smoothing. But there are also alternative solutions, and I think some of you have seen this, folks from Simon Fraser University, the backpack concept you saw over there. I went out running with it yesterday in circles around the parking lot. And the speed control they can do is just astounding, and how much they were able to really nail my speed. And I was out there, and they had me run at 7:30 a mile for exactly 7:30 a mile, and they turned it down to 6:30 a mile, ran exactly 6:30 a mile, and down to 5:30 a mile, and then I died. So that's when 5,000 feet in elevation kicked in. It was a whole different feeling. But think out of the box, right? Think about how you can do things like that. Accurate altitude, it's not just for cyclists. You hear it from cyclists all the time, and cyclists always get the barometric altimeters, but runners want it too, right? Especially the folks that are going up in the mountains, that are doing ultras or things like that. They want those. And the number of folks that I hear from ultramarathoners that go, I want to buy this watch, I really, really do, but it doesn't have a barometric altimeter, and I really need that in an ultramarathon. Track mode. This is kind of an interesting one that nobody has approached yet, right? So you run around a track today with using a GPS device, and what do you get for your splits? You don't get 0.25 miles or 400 meters, right? You get 0.267, 0.24, right? Things like that. Folks want something that recognizes that it's on a track and says, I'm going to go ahead and I'll realign your data correctly to match that track, right? That way, when I go back and later on upload my data, I have something that matches what I actually ran. And the last one is multiple user profiles. People want the ability to share a watch between a husband and wife. You talk about health, right? There's certainly a lot of us that go out and run every single day and run, with their partners and whatnot. But there's a lot of folks that may not run every day and may not run with their partners. They want to be able to share that watch. They want to be able to say, yep, now John is running with the watch, or now Jane is running with the watch, and have that information updated appropriately. Today, that's just not there. Cyclist, weight and look is incredibly important. If you haven't been to Interbike, just go to Interbike. It's all about the look of the device and the weight of the device. Now, never mind this device, I weigh them on like a scale. Like that, the little edge device there, it weighs less than an egg, right? You can put on a scale and it actually weighs less than an egg. As a triathlete, I kind of laugh at that a little bit, right? Because, cyclists are so focused on weight, and then there's all this other areas where they can get weight from, right? I kind of say, if I need to lose that extra 2 ounces, I can just probably eat less cookies, right? That said, if you're catering to the cyclist market, it's incredibly important that you focus on weight and look. It's amazing when you see those, and people, I do reviews of products, sometimes they go back and say, that looks ugly on the handlebar, or that's huge, or whatever, and that's an instant turn off for cyclists. Data consistency and accuracy, Hunter talked a lot about this yesterday in terms of how important this is for cyclists especially. It's got to be consistent. The data has to be displayed and recorded across all head units the same way, right? You can't have, especially in the ANT Plus world, and for the most part that's happening today, but you can't have certain head units that are not taking that data in and doing it in a consistent manner. And high data rates. as becoming more and more important for certain areas, especially cycling. The ability to be able to burst to high data rates, capture that data, and then come back down again to a reasonable level, right? It doesn't have to be capturing, cadence on my mom's bike at a higher data rate for a 2-hour ride, but there are segments of the population. It's relatively easy to be able to change those data rates and move forward on that. This is an interesting one that nobody's really attacking it today, is a low-end transmitting trainer, right? There's, everybody's familiar with a CompuTrainer, right? A $1,500 trainer. There's a lot of those solutions in that realm that cost a lot and do really cool things. But I don't believe, and a lot of the consumers believe, that product should cost that much, right? There are ways to reduce that product down, and Le Mans has done some good work there with the Revolution trainer in bringing that down some more. But I think there'd be more work there done around both a trainer that can record power, but also control resistance. That's an area where I just see that as a massive market opportunity. There's been excitement around the Fox mountain bike integration. You saw some of that over the last day. I think you're gonna see a little more here in a minute. Really, really cool stuff. And it's neat because as a gadget person, like all of us, right, like they go, wow, that's cool, it does this, it talks to this, it talks to this. From the bike shop standpoint, when I talk to bike shops at Interbike about that, they're thrilled because the bike doesn't get returned, right? It's really that simple for them. The bike doesn't come back as misconfigured and broken because it doesn't get returned, right? So think outside the box in this sort of things, and that's an awesome way of doing that. In the last one there, the Power Cow, that's kind of the same, I put that in the same category as the Fox mountain bike integration, just really outside the box thinking. What that is, that's a heart rate strap from a cycle ops folks that predicts power, right? So it predicts your power output. And it's been really fascinating. I've been using it for the last couple of weeks, and for steady rides, it's within 3 watts. So here's a $150 device that's giving a certain segment of the consumer population something that a $1,000 or $1,500 power meter can do within 3 watts. Now, it's not for everybody, and Cyclops will happily tell you that up front. It's for folks like my dad, who goes out and will ride for 4 or 5 hours, right, and enjoy that ride, and wants to have a rough idea, rough order of magnitude of power, but isn't about to drop $1,000 on a power meter, right? That's thinking outside the box. That's really cool stuff, and it's all ANT+, so it's working with all your devices today. Swimmers are funny folks, and I can say that because I don't swim very well, right? Swimmers avoid devices like the plague, right? Anything that attaches them in any way, shape, or form, they hate, unless they're convinced to like it, right? And then they love it, right? It's funny, you talk to swimmers, and I've got a couple of friends that do ITU pro stuff, and one of them is super hardcore swimmer, been swimming since a little kid, and would never dream of putting a watch or anything like that on her wrist. And yet her friend that she also races with recently put the SwimSense watch on there and started. And then a couple weeks back, we got an email saying, so about that SwimSense watch that Lauren's using, do you think I'll like it, right? And so it's funny, you look at the swimming devices, and once a swimmer understands the value prop device and uses it, they tend to love it. The problem here is that these swimming devices are all over the map, right? They don't do what you want them to do in terms of being one cohesive device, right? You got the SwimSense and the PoolMate Pro are really the 2 leading downloadable swim watches today. And that's great to record my workout. But then if I want something for entertainment, I have to get another device, right? I have to put an MP3 player that can't use that same thing. And they're great MP3 players, the SwimP3, Waterfly, and others. And there are other ones that help with pacing. Why can't these devices be coordinated together, right? There's the ability to do that today. It just needs to be done because people don't want to have 3 devices on them. So again, there's a lot of potential swimming, and this is primarily indoor swimming. Outdoor swimming is the same thing, right? You'll laugh, I put the GPS unit on top of my head in the swim cap and go and swim around the lake or whatnot, and that records beautifully, but it's also kind of a pain, right? And people don't want to do that. They want something that can track their swim while they're swimming without a little thing on top of their head. And the last category I'm going to talk about in terms of athletes is multi-sport. There's one crystal clear message here. They want one device to rule them all. They do not want to have multiple devices, ever, right? They just want one device that they can take from the swim to the bike to the run, and they can do that quickly and easily. And it must transition quickly and easily. It must be something that they can quickly pop off in a race and move from segment to segment to segment. They don't want to compromise on features, which is sort of interesting because you look at the runner market says it must be small, it must be pretty, it must be dainty, right? Triathletes actually don't care as much. It's interesting. They want the features. They understand that for them to be able to see that data while they're doing these 3 sports, it may be a little bit bigger watch, and they're actually fine with that. Battery life is critical though. For a triathlete, 17 hours is considered the minimum, right, in terms of what they need to use. And then the reason that number comes from is the Ironman, right? So the Ironman, every Ironman starts at 7 a.m., every Ironman finishes at midnight, 17 hours. You don't finish within that time frame, you're not an official finisher. So from a watch design standpoint, it has to have 17 hours of usage, right? And 20, that's real world usage, not like on the box 17 hours, right? It's got to really actually hit that. And it must be waterproof. I can't tell you the number of watches that come through and I look at it and folks go, these are awesome, except they're IPX7, right? And IPX7 is great if you're putting it in the bathtub, not so great when you swim, right? I can destroy an IPX7 watch in one swim in less than 20 minutes in a pool, right? And that's what frustrates folks the most, is that they see these incredible array of watches out there, but they're useless to them, right? If I'm a triathlete, I'm not gonna buy 2 watches. I'm not gonna buy a $200 or $300 running watch. That would be perfect if it could just have the $15 Target waterproofing features of a watch, right? It needs to do both. And then looking for more diversity in the marketplace today, and this is an opportunity for all of you. There are really only 3 triathlon watches in the market today, 3 big name major triathlon watches, right? And it shouldn't come any surprise to folks in this room, right? Garmin, Timex, and Polar. Those are the 3 triathlon watches that go across all 3 sports and do that well, right? There's so much opportunity for everyone else in the room to jump into that. Phone versus dedicated device, right? You know, you hear the conversation is, it's gonna be the phone, it's gonna be the dedicated device. It's not, it's gonna be both. It's gonna be devices working together, like I talked about earlier. This shouldn't be an either-or conversation. This should be, how can your phone work with your device, right? There are circumstances where you want the device to work by itself, but there are also many circumstances where you want the phone to be interacting with it. When you look at apps and phone usage, right, in terms of why an athlete, especially in the beginner market, athletes are using phone more and more. They're using Runkeeper, Map My Run to go out there and they slap it on their shoulder and they go out for a run, right? They're doing that because A, it's cheaper, right? But B, because in a lot of cases, apps are replacing functionality that's missing in independent devices, right? So if the device that you're trying to sell doesn't have that functionality and somebody can get it for $1.99 on the iTunes store, it's a really easy equation for them. Athletes are concerned about phone breakage though, right? They're really concerned about it. They don't want to break their phone. So you look at solutions around that. You know, Chip's got the case for example, for the bike, and there's obviously the waterproof phones and whatnot from Sony Ericsson. So that's certainly a consideration. That's why it's not an either-or conversation. If I go into a race, I don't really want to bring my phone with me. That seems like it's a whole bunch of badness waiting to happen, right? I want something just to have one device that can work well, and then other devices that can integrate with that. Concepts like MetaWatch, and again, that's very much what Timex displayed yesterday, right? In terms of that concept, obviously MetaWatch is actually a product and whatnot. That type of innovation is what you need to look for going forward. And MetaWatch as a company is very open to looking at ANT+. You know, I've talked to them about that and said, you know, from an athlete standpoint, ANT+ is where it is. And they said, well, that's something that if companies like yourselves want to come to them with solutions, they are open to adding ANT+ into that device. Devices as platforms. You know, the challenge is that you guys build great devices, right? And you build things that are waterproof or gel-proof or whatever proof. They work great. But I know from a software development background that software development resources is tough, right? It's tough because you brought this device to market and then you had to remove those resources and put them on a new product, right? Look at devices as platforms, right? In the same way that we look at the iPhone or the Android phone as a platform, look at your phone as a potential platform. And we're seeing that going forward today. Cerebellum is making a bike head unit, right? They're going to allow folks to develop applications for it, right? And this isn't across your entire product line. I see this at probably the higher end initially, where you're looking at some of your higher end bike devices and whatnot, where somebody can go and develop an application for it. And these are good for the entire ecosystem, right? You're still selling your device. You're making the money off the device. And you're also broadening the appeal of that device, the more applications that are out there. You look at, you know, it's funny, I don't remember who I was talking with, but about the Fox mountain bike thing, right? When I saw the Interbike, my first thought is, this looks like an app, this smells like an app. It's almost an app, right? Meaning it's using the ANT+ Q&A protocol back and forth, but from a design standpoint, it functions a lot like an app would function, right? And if you talk to how it was also built like an app would be built. So that kind of innovation, what if you start allowing other folks to do the same thing and to build their solutions and build creativity on top of it? And you know, it may sound funny to stand up here and go, let other folks use your device, right? Just rewind back 5 years ago. We would have said the same thing with a phone. You know, if you went to any phone supplier, they said, no way, I'm not going to develop anything on my phone. What's happened today? That's common, right? We don't even think twice about allowing folks to develop applications on the phone. Software, we're seeing a lot of really, really cool solutions coming from the community, especially after the licensing change last year. You know, you've got 100 plus apps using the Wahoo dongle today. That's mind-boggling. I'm still blown away that I can stand here a year later and say there's 100 applications that are ANT Plus enabled using that today on the iPhone. And we're starting to see that same innovation happening on the Android phone, especially as more phones are available supporting ANT Plus. The desktop platform, the same thing. We've got both commercial and not-for-profit organizations out there. Golden Cheetah, not-for-profit, doing really cool stuff around ANT Plus within the cycling realm. And then we've got for-profit applications like Trainer Road and CTN and all these other things that people are starting to develop that are looking at going, there's such a huge market out there to tap into, and they're tapping into your devices, right? They're not looking to replace what you're doing today. They're looking to supplement it. They're looking to add to that and add value to the end users' devices. But these depend on APIs, right? This is a challenge that a lot of these folks face, is that they want to interact with their devices better because that's what people are asking for, but they can't in some cases because the APIs just aren't there. Either they're private, or they're unpublished, or they're just simply not there at all, but they really want that level of access in some way, shape, or form. So looking ahead a bit, there's things that you need to do to, I think, make your devices more appealing, right, in terms of how you can differentiate yourself between a cell phone and independent device maker. The biggest thing is leveraging each other, right? You've heard over and over again, it's all about ANT Plus as an ecosystem. It really is, right? You've got power meter folks over here who need the head unit device manufacturers, right? You have to work together, and when the consumers ask for more data from those power meters, right, what they're really saying is, I want to buy both your products, right? That's what they're really saying. Underneath things, they're saying, I want to buy both your products, but it doesn't do this today. How can you help me? A device can't merely be a watch that shows speed, distance, and pace. And this is really, really important. And the reason is because when you start looking at companies that are trying to release watches out there, right, you can no longer release a device that's speed, distance, cadence with ANT Plus on it and hope to break into the market, especially if you're a small company, right? It's very difficult when folks come to me and they say, what do you recommend for a device, right? I'm looking for a device that differentiates itself on features, right? It has to be something different. But it also has to support itself from a customer service standpoint, right? And if you're a smaller device manufacturer, you've got to, exceed the feature limit of the big guys, right? That's just the reality of the market, right? If I walk into a running store, which devices I'm going to see there, right? Probably not the smaller ones, right? So you've got to make yourself stand out. You've got to show yourself and say, I'm doing something really cool, doing everything that they're doing, but I'm doing something even cooler, right? And then you've got to also carry through on customer support, right? You know, the one person in the room that is notorious on incredible customer support is the Quark folks. If you go on the internet and just research, just type the word Quark in service, or type Quark and just read anything you can about on their forums on customer support, and everyone talks about they made it right every single time, right? And that's why, as a company, they've been able to excel and go from a very, very small power meter manufacturer up to something that's now much, much larger. And finally, open APIs, right? They're important for both allowing device integration, but also really important for allowing folks to get their data, right? Do not island people's data. People don't want to, be stuck on a platform forever. They want to be able to move from one platform to the next platform as their goals and their needs change. So allow folks to be able to get data out of a platform and be able to put data in a platform. And I'm seeing that today in the marketplaces, the companies that do this are the ones that are succeeding the fastest, hands down, right? You look at the difference between SwimSense as a watch and the Poolmate Pro as a watch. SwimSense is developing partners like there's no tomorrow, right? Anybody that will talk to them, they'll go talk to them and set it up. Poolmate Pro, there's nothing, right? And that's why you see them exceeding so much. So finally, I get a lot of questions on how you get products in their view and ways to engage me. And so last year I answered this afterwards a whole bunch of times, and I figured it'd be much, much quicker to explain it in one slide. I get products one of three basic buckets of ways, right? The first way is NDA discussions. So if you're planning a product a year or 2 years out, you can come to me and we can have a discussion about your product, and if you want feedback on what you think or what I think about the product, we can do that. And that's something that never gets published publicly or never goes out to the internet. It's just simply a private discussion that we're having. I don't charge for that. It's just my way to get the feedback from all these millions of people to your product. The second is a product launch, typically timed to review, where there's an NDA component of it, right? So you may have a product that's coming out, say, December 1st, right? You may get that product to me in the November timeframe. I can play with it, because remember, I want to actually use the product. I don't want to just write something up based on PR on the day it releases. And then I can time that to your product announcement. And then finally, a post-release review. Something that's already in the marketplace today. That's something where you've got a product out there, you just want to review it, and you can work with me to review it. And typically speaking, products come to me for 45 to 60 days is the way it works. I want to be able to use the product for a period of time, and then I'll send it back to you afterwards. I don't keep the products. If you have products that you don't want back, and sometimes I'll give them away or whatnot. But I try to remain agnostic there and basically be separate from that whole stream there. What I do like about the vast majority of your products, though, in this room, is that they're no bigger than like a grapefruit, right? Which sounds funny, but I recently got the Vossa swim trainer, right? Which is cool, but it's 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, and it takes up a lot of space. And there were some unhappy moments in the household when that first arrived, right? She's nodding, yes, and it's still there. So, with the exception of the octane guy who's somewhere in here, everything else is like this big. It's great. So, that's all I have. I want to thank you for your time. I'm here till the end of tonight. My flight's at 11:59 p.m. tonight. So, if you have questions or want to chat, feel free to come up and discuss that with me. Thanks a lot.